Hello, this is your old professor friend, Mr. Sisk. I'm going to try a voiceover of this unit's main slideshow. It's about Congress, okay, our National Congress in Washington, D.C. Now, in front of us, we see We the People, a document called the U.S. Constitution. The first three words, We the People, which is very democratic, okay. The Constitution is divided up into articles. Kind of in the middle of the page, you can sort of see some weird letters that say article and then the Roman numeral one. They used Roman numerals back then. Uh, the creators of the US Constitution wanted the Congress to be the cornerstone of the national government. And so it's in Article 1. Now, the US Constitution is broken up into a whole bunch of different articles. Uh, Article 1 follows the preamble, which is the introductory paragraph, and Article 1 is about Congress. And another phrase for Congress is the legislative branch of the national government. Uh, the United States Constitution sets up the rules for the legislative branch in Articles 1. And there are two chambers in Congress. One is called the House of Representatives, where each state should have at least one representative, but the number of representatives is based on population. Each representative's term is 2 years, and every 2 years there is another national election for all 435 reps in the House of Representatives. Now, the Senate is different. The Senate, uh, each state has two senators. The term is 6 years. And 1/3 of the Senate seats are chosen every 2 years. Yeah, it's a little tricky, but it does work well. Now, on the left side of our Venn diagram, we see the House of Reps with 435 members. On the right side, we see the Senate. Two members per state times 50 states is 100 members. Now, they both make laws. That's the center part there. Whenever they pass a law, it has to be the exact same language that goes to the president as one proposed law. And a proposed law is called a bill. That bill has to be the exact same wording out of both the House and the Senate that goes to the president, where if it is to become an official law, the president has to sign it. Okay. Now, in the House of Reps, there are 435 members. How many members are in each state is determined by the population of each state. And whereas in the Senate, it's two senators per state. And so the House of Reps, it benefits higher populated states. So California has 52 or 53 reps. Wyoming and Montana only have one. So the more reps you have, the more political voting power you have in the House of Reps. And so California has 53 times the voting power of Wyoming or Montana in the House of Reps because of population disparities. Whereas in the Senate, hey, Wyoming gets two senators and California gets two senators. So the small states are benefited by the Senate. Uh, just more information. So the House of Reps, the age requirement to get into the House of Reps is 25. The age requirement to get into the Senate is 30. If you want to be in the House of Reps, you can you could have been born in another country, but you had to be a citizen for at least 7 years. Whereas the Senate, you have to be a citizen at least 9 years before you become a candidate. And the term is different, 2 years for the House, 6 years for the Senate. Some of you like your information more like this, where it's very clear and delineated and in nice blocks. Okay. So that's a good frame to have, a good slide to have when you take the quiz. Now, the number of representatives for the House of Reps, it's shown in this map. Look at California with 53. Look at Texas with 36, Florida with 27, New York with 27. I mean, just those four states probably have as many representatives as the lowest numbered 30 states. That's just amazing. Okay. But in the Senate, those 30 states may have 60 senators, whereas those 8 populous states may only have 8. Oh, oops. I should go back one. So, except for the state of Washington, California has as many reps in the House of Reps as all the other Western states combined. That's amazing. Some slides in the rest of the slideshow will show the original language of the Constitution in Article 1. We'll explore what that original language meant. Now, the first situation, the next slide, delegates at the Constitutional Convention in 1787 wanted the House of Reps to be based on population. If a state had a lot of citizens, it should have lots of reps in the House of Reps. So, how would the national government know how many citizens lived in each state? Think about it. Okay, so here's the actual language in Article 1 that tries to answer that. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the U.S. and within every subsequent term of 10 years in such manner as they shall by law direct. Ew, is that some ugly language or what? Okay. Now, enumeration means an official counting. If you see within enumeration, numerate, kind of like numerals. Okay. Now, what it means is go down to the blue at the bottom. The actual number of representatives in a state shall be determined by a census of the population every 10 years. Maybe you've heard of a census before. The amount of citizens in the census count will determine how many reps a state gets in the House of Reps. So every 10 years, the national government sends out federal workers to take a census of the population, an official count. Okay. So the first census was supposed to be taken by the national government employees 3 years after the convention. That's what those original words said, 3 years after this meeting, the convention. So if we go 1787 plus 3 is 1790. So the first census was 1790. The last census that we had was 2020, and the next one is 2030. Okay. So, hope we kind of understand how the census, why it is an official national government act to make sure that each state is based with its correct amount of representatives in the House of Representatives. Now, down at the bottom, what other rule would determine how many reps would be allowed for each state once the census was taken in 1790? So, we just don't need to know what the population is of each state. There's something else we have to know too. So, the number of representatives shall not exceed one for every 30,000, but each state shall have at least one representative. So that says for every 30,000 citizens, a state will get one representative in the House of Reps. But that last part, if a state is under 30,000, it still gets at least one representative. Now, there's a key word for this process of giving an equal amount of reps By that 30,000 for each congressional district. It starts with an A, it's in the orange block there, and it means this long word that you've never heard of means the process for states to divide up their populations by equal amounts to determine how many reps each state will get. That word is apportionment. States will be apportioned one rep in the House of Reps for every 30,000 citizens in the census count. Oh, apportionment. Okay. All right. So one rep for every, it says 30 comma 00, should say 30 comma 000 citizens. So let's say a state had 60,000. They would get two reps. Let's say they would have 45,000. Well, it's not 60, but it's over 30, so they get one rep. Let's say a state had 20,000. That state would get one rep. And let's say it's 200,000, 6 times 30 is 180. So they would get six reps. It's not up to the 210,000, which would be seven. Now, down at the bottom in blue, the numbers of apportionment have changed in the modern era. 700,000 citizens today is equal to one rep from a congressional district. California has about 36 million citizens from the 2020 census. If we take that 36 million, divide it by 70,000, that's close to 53 representatives. Key point: the higher a state's population, the more representatives that each state has in the House of Reps. The more representatives is equal to more political voting power in our national Congress in the House of Reps. States with big populations have a big advantage in the House of Reps. More voting reps equals more political power. So if we take a look at modern California, it has like, I don't know, 52, 53 different districts. Okay. All the districts there are in different colors. And each of those districts has around 700,000 people in each one of those congressional districts. Okay. Now, let's go down to Riverside County, which is part of the 25 district is Riverside County. Part of the 41 district is Riverside County. Part of the 48 district is Riverside County, which includes Temecula. 41 includes Menifee. And then 39, that is like 100% in Riverside County. That's like the city of Riverside and Corona and Norco. Okay. Greater LA area, congressional districts. So in LA, they're just, so close together that they got a zillion districts there. Each different color stands for a CD, congressional district. Okay, so that purple color, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 counties, but hardly anyone lives in those counties. So you add up all of them together, and that equals one congressional district, but a whole bunch of counties. Whereas LA County, it probably has 8 or 9 or 10 different congressional districts because all the people live so tightly packed. Now, if we go to where Menifee and Wildemar and Marietta are, that's District 41 or 42, depending on the year. The red smiley face is where I live. Okay. So where our campus is where the sun is there. Okay. And we're in District 42 or 41, depending on which census count it was. The Vice President of the United States shall be President of the Senate, but shall have no vote unless they be equally divided. So the Vice President is the President of the Senate, but the Vice President hardly ever goes to the Senate, usually only when there might be a tie in a vote. Okay? So look down in yellow at the situation. All of the senators are present for a vote. What was the count of for and against voting if the vice president also voted? Okay? Now, if all the senators are present for a vote, that's 100 of them. What was the count of the voting? Well, 100 senators equals a 50-50 tie. The vice president breaks the tie by issuing the 101st vote. So the vote was 51-50. Voila. Now, what does bill mean? That is a proposed law brought before a legislature. And I think I may have skipped one there. I did. I skipped one. Okay. The next bit of language is, but if the president does not sign the bill. So this is when the Senate and the House of Reps are are both sending the exact same bill to the president to sign. After the comma, he, the president, shall return it to Congress with his objections to the bill, and Congress can proceed to reconsider the vetoed bill. So, what does bill mean? Well, that is a proposed law. And what one word process is the above word implying? So when Congress can proceed to reconsider the vetoed bill. So when the president will not sign a bill, that is called a veto. But Congress can overcome that veto. What is the word that is not in the official words? What is the word that means Congress can uh, overrule a president on a veto? So if we go down to way at the bottom in big red, override. Congress wants to reverse a president's veto, override. That's what it's called today. But back then, they did not put it into the language of the Constitution. So sometimes the original language of the Constitution is written in a way that is nearly impossible to decipher. What the heck does Article 1, Section 8 mean? Now, this is part of Section 8. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may, by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government for the United States. Oh my goodness. How are we supposed to know what the heck that means? Well, you pick it apart. First, let's look at become the seat of the government of the United States. That means, where is the national capital city going to be? You got to remember, in 1787, when the Constitution was written, there was no Washington City. There was no Washington, D.C. It was built out of scratch farmland later. Okay? Let's go back up to over such district. Remember, Washington City is not called Washington City. It's called Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. Our national capital city is not within state boundaries. It's in the boundaries of a special district. And that district is exactly 10 miles by 10 miles. Okay? And that district had to be taken from land of states back then. So it was taken from both Maryland and Virginia. So that's what it means by cession. Cession means to take away land of particular states. And Congress had to accept this whole plan that would come up in the first few Congresses of where the national capital was going to be. So when the whole constitutional government started, the president and Congress, their offices were in New York City. Congress will agree upon the site of a national capital city. It will be a special political district and not part of any state. It will be carved out of current states, and all laws of the district will be passed by Congress. Ah, okay. Where's Washington, D.C. exactly? Oh, it's right there, over by the Chesapeake Bay, one of the biggest bays in the world. Near the Chesapeake Bay on the eastern coast of the United States, between the states of Maryland and Virginia. There it is. Maryland's on the right side, Virginia's on the left. That's what Washington, D.C. looks like from outer space. Okay, now here's a little closer. Now, it used to go over to the Green Virginia side, but that land was mostly given back to Virginia. So, Washington, D.C., that's that squarish part. Those are the boundaries of it. And where the actual U.S. Capitol and the White House and the Supreme Court buildings are, that's where the circled star is. Now, also in the original Constitution language, somewhere under Congress, it says to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. What does that mean? Uniform rule, the same set of rules for every state. And what does naturalization means? It means immigration. So the national government would set rules that would be the same for all 50 states regarding how immigrants moved into their state and became citizens that would all be a national process to follow. This is a repeat. Representatives shall be blanked among the several states which are included within this union according to their respective numbers. And that word is apportioned. That's a very important word, why I've used it a second time in this slideshow. The House of Reps is the only part of the national government that is apportioned by population. Okay, on the next slide, let's see where the House of Reps meets in the U.S. Capitol building and where the Senate meets. Okay, so the House chamber is to the far left, the Senate chamber is to the far right, and in the middle is a whole bunch of real cool public viewing rooms. On the next slide, what do the words of Article 1 of the Constitution mean? Apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons. Those would be white citizens. And 3/5 of all other persons. What does this mean? 3/5 of all other persons. Well, I think I skipped one again. Boop. Yep. The 3/5 compromise, where down in the southern states that allowed slavery, the southern states said, hey, we want lots of political power and we want representatives to represent our slaves, even though we don't count them as citizens. So both the South and the North, during the Constitutional Convention, they came up with this weird compromise where 5 slaves counted as 3 white citizens. Huh. That's racism. Oops. Went too far again. Okay. Here we go. Now, the truth, the more reps a state has in the House of Reps, the more political power a state has. So let's take a look at how different states viewed the number of reps, let's say South Carolina should have in Congress. South Carolina had lots of slaves. So let's look at the Northern Anti-Slavery Plan in blue. 120,000 white people in South Carolina and 100,000 slaves. And the North wanted the slaves to count as 0 citizens, since that is what they were considered down south. So the slaves wouldn't count any towards political power in the House of Reps. So the Northern Anti-Slavery Plan, they wanted slaves not to count, so 4 reps for South Carolina. But down south, the southern pro-slavery states, they wanted the slaves to count as 3/5 of each white citizen. So the 100,000 slaves would be equal to 60,000 white citizens, which is equal to 2 more reps at the 30,000 citizens per rep. So the Southern pro-slavery plan would be 6 reps for South Carolina, where the Northern anti-slavery plan would be 4. And so they let the 3/5 compromise stand, the North did, so that the country would not split apart. So, in purple, Southern slave states wanted slaves to count for purposes of representation so that Southern slave states could have more political power in the House of Reps. Whereas in blue, non slave state delegates did not allow slaves to count as a whole white citizen in the debates on this issue at the Constitutional Convention. So, down in red, the 3/5 compromise was agreed upon. America was born as a country that legalized slavery. Boo. But the 13 states did stay together. On the next few slides, the structure where the House of Representatives and the Senate work, the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Now, that's what it looks like today. Ooh, that is wonderful. I want one of those. Now, around 1846, about 14 years before Lincoln was elected, that's what the Capitol building looked like. And there was not that huge dome, just a smaller dome. But around the time Lincoln was elected, they took off the smaller dome and they started to build what is today the National Dome. And they expanded many parts of the whole Congress building, which is called the Capitol building. So today, here's what the House chamber looks like. Remember, it has to fit 485 people, 485 reps. So it's a big, big meeting hall. Whereas the Senate chamber is much smaller. This is from an old postcard uh, where they used to show color drawings or colorized photos. And so this is the Senate chamber in the U.S. Capitol, and each